Every day, approximately 80 people are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is a disorder characterized by abnormally high blood sugar levels. In this form of diabetes, there is an abnormal amount of metabolism of fats and proteins. Also, specialized cells in the pancreas called beta cells stop producing insulin. Insulin controls how much glucose is passed from the blood into cells for conversion to energy. Lack of insulin results in the inability to use glucose for energy or to control the amount of sugar in the blood. So, Professor, what role do enzymes play in diabetes?
Well, there are three key digestive enzymes. Protease, found in the juices of the stomach, pancreas, and intestine, help break down the proteins from the food you eat. Lipase, also found in the stomach and pancreas, help break down the fats. Amylase from saliva, pancreatic, and stomach juices help digest the sugars or carbohydrates. Diabetes is also associated with an abnormal metabolism of fats and proteins, so all three key enzymes, lipase, protease, and amylase, are important in managing diabetes because they will help digest all three groups of nutrients.
So, Professor, are there any viruses exactly that can cause type 1 diabetes?
A virus cannot cause diabetes on its own, but people are sometimes diagnosed with type 1 diabetes during or after a viral infection, suggesting a link between the two. Also, the onset of type 1 diabetes occurs more frequently during the winter when viral infections are more common. Viruses possibly associated with type 1 diabetes include cytomegalovirus, adenovirus, rubella, and mumps. I have found several ways these viruses may damage or destroy beta cells or possibly trigger an autoimmune response in susceptible people. We are trying to identify a virus that can cause type 1 diabetes so that a vaccine might be developed to prevent the disease.
How is protein synthesis involved in type 1 diabetes?
The regulation of protein synthesis is a central component of physiological homeostasis. Physiological homeostasis is the body's attempt to maintain a constant internal environment. Type 1 diabetic people are in an intense state where their body breaks down molecules without insulin replacement for energy. The role of insulin in protein synthesis has been investigated in regional and individual protein studies. Since proteins are functional molecules, it is a possibility that many complications related to insulin resistance are related to defective synthesis of certain proteins.
So, can type 1 diabetes be treated?
Yes, there are treatments for type 1 diabetes. People with type 1 diabetes need to have an eating plan. They also need to pay attention to how much physical activity they engage in, because physical activity can help the body use insulin better, so it can convert glucose into energy for cells. Everyone with type 1 diabetes and some people with type 2 diabetes also need to take insulin injections. Also, everyone who has diabetes should be seen at least once every 6 months by a diabetes specialist. Ideally, one should also see an exercise physiologist for help in developing a physical activity plan, and perhaps another mental health professional for help with the stresses and challenges of living with a chronic disease. Everyone who has diabetes should have regular eye exams by an eye doctor to make sure that any eye problems associated with diabetes are caught early and treated before they become serious.
One last question, Professor. Can type 1 diabetes be passed down from parents to their offspring? And if so, how?
Heredity plays an important part in determining who is likely to develop type 1 diabetes. Genes are passed down from biological parent to child. Genes carry instructions for making proteins that are needed for the body cells to function. Variations in genes that affect more than 1% of a population group are called gene variants. The risk of developing type 1 diabetes is increased by a certain variant of HLA-DKA1 gene, HLA-DQB1 gene, and HLA-DRB1 gene. These variants are caused by insertion mutations and deletion mutations. The HLA gene also provides instructions for making proteins that play a critical role in the immune system. These HLA genes help the immune system distinguish the body's own proteins from proteins made by foreign invaders such as viruses and bacteria. If the HLA gene is mutated, then the immune system will damage friendly insulin-producing beta cells in the pancreas.
Now let's dive a little into mutations. One mutation that affects the HLA gene is deletion. Deletions are mutations in which a section of DNA is lost or deleted. As you can see, in the process of transcription, the U in the mRNA was deleted, which moved everything left, making a new sequence. Another mutation that affects the HLA gene is insertion. Insertions are mutations in which an extra base pair is inserted into a new place in the DNA. If you look towards the bottom of the page, a C was added, moving everything right, making a new sequence. These mutations change how the HLA gene works.
So, when exactly did your brother get diagnosed with type 1 diabetes?
Gary got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 9 years old. We knew something was wrong when he was abnormally thirsty. After we took him to the doctor took his blood sugar. Immediately, the doctor left and came back with a sad expression on his face as he told us our brother had type 1 diabetes.
What were your initial thoughts when he was diagnosed?
At first, I thought diabetes was only a minor disease, to come to the realization that diabetes was actually incurable. Later on, the doctor came back into the room and told us it could be treated.
So, what may happen if they don't take their medicine or calculate their carbohydrate intake?
Well, if my brother doesn't take his medication, his blood sugar levels rise. If the blood sugar gets too high, it can lead to blindness, kidney failure, or amputation. Also, people with untreated diabetes can receive damage to several organs. Thinking about this happening to my brother breaks my heart.
This may seem like a strange question to wrap this interview up, but overall, does your brother having this disease seem like a curse to you?
Well, it's not as much a curse as it is of bad luck. The cause of type 1 diabetes is unknown, although certain variants of genes can increase the risk factor of acquiring diabetes. We knew that it was coming after my grandmother and mother were diagnosed. Apparently, type 1 diabetes is the dominant trait in our family. My mother was always afraid of passing down her disease. After my brother was diagnosed, I was tested. Luckily, I got the recessive trait. Even though I didn't get the disease, I always sympathize for my brother and can only imagine what he's going through. If I had the opportunity, I would switch places with him simply because it breaks my heart that he was unfortunate enough to receive this.
As you heard before, Gary's brother was not diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. He also said he was given the recessive trait. As you take a look at the calculations, Gary's brother was very lucky to not be given diabetes. His mother and father were both heterozygous dominant for diabetes, which left him a 25% chance of not getting diabetes, and he came out successful.
In conclusion, type 1 diabetes, although not fatal, can be dangerous if not regulated, as one must oversee their carbohydrate intake. As mentioned earlier, the probability of how dangerous it can be can vary from person to person, but luckily Gary did not receive any hazardous variant of the virus. Overall, scientists will forever try to come up with a cure for this disease so people like Gary can live their lives without worry.